Hi everyone, and welcome back to our series on how to edit videos using DaVinci Resolve. And so glad you're checking out the program. I think it's one of the best video editing systems out there, and the great thing about it is it's free, right? You can just download the free version, and for the most part, you can get away with editing your home video projects with no problem using the free version. And so it's a good way to get started learning how to edit videos. And in this lesson, we're going to show you that it's really quite easy to learn how to edit videos on a computer. Easy as drag and drop, right? That's what you always want to hear. When you're learning something new, it says easy as drag and drop. Of course, there are some other things that you'll want to pick up along the way. And this is actually lesson 6 in our series. And so if you haven't seen the videos that lead up to this one, I'm going to put a link to our playlist in the description just below this video. And of course, we have other videos on DaVinci as well, a lot of quick tips videos. So it's a good idea to subscribe to the channel. But for today, let's get going on how to edit videos using the drag and drop method in DaVinci Resolve. Let's go. We have kind of started a project called Better to Die Walking, and that's what you do. You start a project when you want to edit. But an interesting thing to note is that inside any given project, you can have many timelines. So I could do a whole video, I could edit a whole video on one timeline, and then within the same project, I could go ahead and start a whole new timeline and edit another whole video. And you usually do that when you're going to be doing variations using the same media, or at least a lot of the same media that you used in one video. You know you have to do another one that is going to draw on a lot of that same media. Well, you can create another timeline. And DaVinci allows you to have, I think, unlimited timelines. I'd have to check on that, but at least, let's say 100 anyway, in any given project. So I think what we'll do to start this lesson is we'll start a brand new timeline. And that way my screen will look identical to yours as you start a project. Let's go up to File and choose New Timeline. I think some other video editors might call this a sequence, a new sequence, creating what we might call a project within a project, or a sub-project, you might say. Let's call this Learning Media Skills 6. Now, whenever you start a new timeline, you are given the option of choosing how many video tracks you want to start with, or how many audio tracks you want to start with, but you should know that you can easily add more video tracks once you've started. So don't worry too much about that. You can choose whether or not your audio tracks are going to be stereo or mono. At this point, I'll probably just leave it on stereo because some of my tracks will be stereo and some I'll want to be mono, and we'll show you how to change it once the project is started. We'll keep it checked as an empty timeline. And one more button down here, Use Project Settings. We're going to keep that checked for now. This screen right now should look a lot like what your screen will look like as you start a project on your computer. We've already covered what all of these different panels are and what they do, and how you can get the video inspector panel on screen. And the area down here is called our timeline panel, and this here is our audio meters. What we're going to concentrate most of our time on today is how to work with the video timeline, how to bring media and assemble it on this timeline to create your video. You'll notice that the timeline is divided into two parts. The upper part has your video tracks, and when we started this project, we said we wanted it to have 3 video tracks. But just notice that anywhere in this area, if you right-click, you can add a track. And now, as we scroll up over there, we see we have 4 tracks. You want to add 10 tracks at the same time? Simply go and choose Add Tracks, and you can type in how many tracks you want. Now, you probably rarely would need 10 video tracks, but if you're working with a multi-camera shoot, maybe it's a 6-camera shoot, and you want to add some graphics and other things on there. There are a few times where I have probably built out a project. A music video, for example, is a situation where you're adding a lot of tracks to get the effects that you want and graphics and so on. But 4 is going to be probably plenty for this project. And then down here we've got our audio tracks. And you'll remember that we started out with 5 audio tracks. I don't think we'll need more than that, but again, it's really easy to add more audio tracks if you need to. And as you do, you can choose whether or not you want them to be mono, stereo, 5.1, 7.1, or adaptive. Something I like to do to keep myself a little bit organized is to name some of my tracks. So what do we typically want to put on video track 1? Well, in my case, especially for this sample video that we're doing, video track 1 is probably best going to be populated by our interview. This particular video is I'm interviewing a person in Kenya, and she makes up the primary part of this video. And so let's call video track 1 interview. And audio track 1 is going to be her audio, the audio of the interviewee. So we'll call it interview as well. And I know that I'm going to want to cover the interview with a lot of illustrative B-roll, we call it, video clips that illustrate what the person we're interviewing is saying and talking about. And so I'm going to call video track 2 B-roll. Then audio track 2 is going to be the ambient audio from the B-roll clips. By the way, to change the names of these, you just click on it and type in what you want. The third track is probably going to be my voiceover. The lady that we were interviewing is an ethnic person living in a remote region of Kenya, and she doesn't know English. A lot of people in Kenya do speak English, but this lady didn't because she's an ethnic minority. And so I had a translator on the spot and was able to assemble her interview based on the translation that I got on the spot. And then I had my daughter actually record the statements in English, and we call those voiceovers. And probably one more track we'll put in at this point, and that is music. All right, so we are ready to edit. And so let's go after our interview here. We've got just the one interview for this video. And you can either just grab that from the bin and drag it down to your timeline, or you can double click on it and choose which portion of the video that you want to start with and bring that down to the timeline. So let's say we wanted to pick her up right here and just bring her out to about here. Now we've defined just that section of the video, and we can just drag that down. You might ask, well, how did I define that? I should have told you. Pick a point in your video clip in this preview window here. We call it a preview window. And when you get to the point where you want to start your edit, you hit the I key, and that sets an in point. I for in point. And then you find that place where you want, where she stops talking, and you set an out point by hitting the O key, and that's what defines the section. So now when we bring the video clip down to our timeline, we're only going to bring down that portion of the interview. Now you might notice that as you point your mouse here in this area here, a couple of icons pop up here. One is kind of a film strip icon, and the other looks like an audio waveform. And what that means is, if I only wanted the video portion of the video clip, I would click on the video icon and drag and drop it down to the timeline. And now I'm only getting the video and no audio. And the reason why you might want to do that is, especially B-roll clips, if there was a lot of wind noise and you just have no audio that you can use, well, you don't necessarily want to drag down the whole clip and delete the audio. You just want to bring down the video. And the same is true if you want only the audio. You can just click on this icon and then drag, and all you're doing is dragging the audio. But, and I'll get rid of these, if you want to bring both video and audio together at the same time, just point and click to the video image here, any section that's not the icons, and then drag that down, and you can see we're bringing in video and audio. Now, you might be wondering, why is there 4 tracks of audio? This video interview was done with the Canon R5C. I had a special mic on top of the video camera that was recording fairly good audio, and that's what shows up on the top line. This is fairly decent audio on the top line. The second one is actually an exact duplicate of audio track 1, just at a lower decibel. These other 2 tracks are coming off the very poor quality mic that's built into the camera itself. So we'd only ever want to use these 2 audio tracks for a reference, and rarely use it as the real ambient audio. So in most cases, all I need is track 1 for most of my clips. Let's take a look at this B-roll over here, and we see all of these clips here were filmed in the same way. There's a good mic on top of the camera that's recording decent audio, a backup of that, and then 2 tracks of reference audio. So, what are we going to do with all of these extra tracks? Well, there's a couple of ways of handling this issue. One great way that I found is to select all of your tracks that you know were recorded this way by going into the bin, just clicking anywhere in your bin, hitting Control or Command A on the Mac to select all at once, do a right click on these, and go down to Clip Attributes. Go over at the top menu to Audio, and you'll see all of your audio tracks showing up here. And because we know that we'll ever only use channel 1 from any of these audio clips, we can delete the others. You see the little trash can here. We can delete these, then hit OK. And because we have all of the clips selected, it's going to delete them not just to one, but to all of them. And so now, when we drag any one of these clips down, we only have audio track A. We don't have the 3 others. And you can verify that by selecting any one. We did it to all of them. Okay, but there is another way. Let's get rid of this. Let's go back to our interview because we didn't delete the 3 tracks on this one. Let's drag it down. We see we've still got the 4 tracks to deal with. By the way, another way that you can do it is hold the Option key down on the Mac and lasso the 3 that you don't want and hit the delete key. That's one way to get rid of them. But here is probably the best solution, and that is select the audio tracks that you want when you're dragging and dropping a clip on the timeline. So notice I've deselected A2, A3, A4. I've left video 1 and audio 1, and so now when I drag this clip down, either the whole clip, or maybe we'll just grab the one from our preview monitor here where we've defined an in and out. Let's just drag it down and notice that now we only have the 1 audio track. It's not picking up the other 3 because we've deselected those tracks from receiving any material. Right now, we're only going to receive media on V1 and A1. However, you can override that. Let's bring this portion down again and notice that if I was to drag the video clip down to V2, then DaVinci will let me leave it there by releasing my mouse button, and now it's on V2. And notice that it has also put the audio on A2, even though they were not defined. So when you are dragging and dropping, you can point and drop your clip to any video track, and DaVinci will let you drop it there. And it will by default set the audio in a corresponding audio track. Just go ahead and try this yourself. Grab a video clip and point it to V1. The audio will be on A1. But you can override it by pointing the video to V2, and the audio is going to go down to A2. And same as you go up to V3, audio is going to go to audio 3. But what if we wanted to place our B-roll? Let's maybe actually go to our B-roll bin here and pick a good shot. All right, here we have a clip of her working on her brooms. And what we would want to do is take a look at it. You can either scroll with your mouse across and take a look at the clip that way, or at any point you can just hit the space bar and it'll play so that you can get a look at it. Looks like it's a little out of focus at the first there, then it comes into focus. So that might be our first in point. And then we can hit the space bar again, and let's say we take it to about there. And set an out point with our O key. And now this is the B-roll clip that we want to place onto our interview to help illustrate what she's talking about. So what we would do is, first of all, find the point where she's talking about the brooms. Let's say it's right there. Now we want to illustrate what she's talking about by showing a clip of her working on her brooms. And the way we would do that is we would point our mouse up in the preview monitor, grab the clip, and drag and drop it down to our B-roll track, V2 and A2. The audio goes to the ambient audio of her working on her brooms. Now it looks like a very small clip. That's because the interview is quite long, and so by proportion it looks small. Let's expand this out some more so that we can see this in a more normal way. So what's happening here is she's talking, and that's on V1. But when it gets to the place where we put our B-roll clip on track 2, V2 and A2, then the video output that we see over here in our record monitor, let's give this a title, over here is our record monitor. That's our output. That's what we're going to send when we export the video. We traditionally called this the record monitor. That kind of dates back to when we used to edit videos using tape machines, and we would have one monitor showing what the record deck was going to get. So that's why this is called the record monitor. These days you might find it easier to think of it in terms of the timeline monitor or the output monitor, maybe the export monitor, however you want to name it. Maybe for the purposes of our tutorials, we'll call it the output monitor. So you have your preview monitor over here and your output monitor over here. And I'll try and remember to maintain that so we can be consistent. And whenever I talk about the output monitor, you'll know that I'm talking about the one on the right here. This is what is going to be exported in the final video. And why is it showing up here instead of the interview? Well, whatever video clip you have on the uppermost video line here, we've got video track 1, video track 2, video track 3. Well, whatever video clip you have on the highest track, even if we had 100 tracks, the video that you place on track 100, that's what's going to show. Because it's taking the highest position, that's what's actually going to show when you export your video. So, for example, if we brought another clip down here of the children eating, well, when we play this, we see the interview, and then track 2 kicks in, and we see the B-roll of her working on the brooms. But because we've placed another video clip on V3, well, that's what's going to show on the output. So this is how you can assemble your video, and whatever you put on the next track up is what's going to show in the end. Now the shot of her working on the brooms is still there, and if we were to take away this shot, or let's just break it apart, let's cut this video in two by hitting the C key. Now we've broken this video clip into 2 parts, and we can take our mouse and slide one away, and we see that the clip of her working on the brooms is still there and would show up if there's nothing above it. So whatever has nothing above it, that's what's going to show on the output monitor. All right, so you get the idea. Now, one more thing I want to show you before we wrap up, and that is, what if you want to be more precise about where this media lands? Right now, when we're dragging and dropping this media, I think we already pointed out that if you drag and drop it on V2, the audio by default is going to show up on A2. If we dragged it to V3, the audio is going to automatically go to A3. And if we went and took the video up to V4, well, the audio is going down to A4. But what if we wanted to be more precise in where the audio landed? Let's say we wanted to place the video portion of our media on V4, but we wanted the audio to keep landing on the ambient track, the A2. Well, we can do that, but we have to move away from the easy drag and drop method. But just so you know, here's how it works. First of all, go over here and define which track we want to place this on. So let's scroll up here, and you can do that with if you have a mouse with a wheel, or you've learned how to use the magic mouse as a wheel. Just point anywhere within the video portion of our timeline and scroll up with your wheel, and you can go up and find other tracks. And so if for some reason you wanted to place the video on V4, but you wanted to keep the ambient audio landing on A2, the ambient audio track, well, let's just define that by clicking on it, and then you see it has the red border. And now, because we've defined it this way, we can place this B-roll on video track 4 and still have the ambient audio landing where it should. However, you can't do it by drag and drop. Notice what happens if we go to place it on video track 4, the audio is still landing down on A4. So how can we do it? We've defined it to be the ambient audio. Oh, notice it's also changed our definition back to the audio 1. Let's undo that. You know how to do undo, right? If you've been using word processor, Command Z or Z in America. That's on the Mac. Of course, it would be Control Z or Z on the PC. That gets rid of. That's the undo. That's the universal undo keyboard shortcut, right? And that lovely keyboard shortcut comes on over to Resolve. So that's good to know. Anytime you want to undo something, Command or Control Z or Z, if you live in America. So let's try that again. Let's define our audio to go to the ambient track again. Our definition is still up at video 4, so that's okay. But this time, rather than do a drag and drop, we're going to use this little icon here, the overwrite clip. And one more thing that you should do for this is define where you want this clip to land on the timeline by pointing your timeline cursor to where you want it to start. Let's maybe get rid of this so it's not confusing. So wherever you want your B-roll clip to start, you need to place your timeline cursor there. And then going up here and using this icon here, now it says overwrite clip, and that has some other capabilities as well, and we'll show you that in an upcoming lesson. But for today, we can use it to place our B-roll clip very precisely, defining what video track and what audio track, by just, first of all, defining your area here. What's the part that you want? So you've got that defined. You've got your timeline cursor in place. You've got your video and audio tracks defined. Now just click here, and your clip shows up on the track that you wanted, video 4, and the audio has landed where you want it, on the ambient audio track. So I wanted to show you that. I know it goes beyond the simple drag and drop method, but I just want you to know it's possible to very precisely define where you want the clip to go. All right, so that is how you edit. Let's again get rid of this, and just a little review. We've still got our interview track. Even though we can't see it, it's still there. Remember, what's happening here is there's just not enough space here on our monitor to see all 4 tracks at once. So if you need to access or take a look and see what's on V1 at this point, remember you can just scroll, just point anywhere within that video area and scroll with your mouse wheel, and that will reveal the tracks that are below. All right, so just in review, if you want to add B-roll to illustrate what she's saying, the part where she's talking. Okay, she's talking here. But we want to not necessarily see 8 minutes of her talking. That would become very boring, wouldn't it? And so we want to cover what she's talking about with illustrative material. And the way we can do that is go to our B-roll bin up here. And there's 2 ways that you can do it. Remember, you can either double click on it. Well, 3 ways. You could drag the whole clip right from the bin down to the timeline. But there's probably parts of this that you wouldn't really necessarily want to use. So the better method is to double click on it, and that makes it show up in our preview monitor. And now we can go in and define a portion that we want to use. Let's call this the in point, and here's our out point. And now it's just a matter of dragging and dropping. There is actually one more way that you can bring video clips into your preview monitor. You can drag and drop them right into your preview monitor, and that brings the clip in and lets you select another portion. Okay, and then again, drag and drop. So there you have it. It's as easy as drag and drop. Just before we sign off, let's go take a look at the finished program. I finished this project up a few weeks ago, and don't worry, we will still, as we continue our series of lessons here, we'll assemble this with you so that you can see how this project was put together. But for today, I wanted you to just take a look at how a finished program looks on the timeline, and how all of these little blocks of video and audio are assembled on the timeline to complete your project. Let's expand it out a little bit so we can see these blocks a little better. As you expand this out, you can actually visualize what's happening in each clip with the pictorial representation of each clip right on the timeline. We've got her title here in a block. We've got some other graphics going on here in the intro. And so each one of these little media clips shows up as a block on your timeline, and it's just a matter of assembling them, something like putting a puzzle together. You put all of these clips in order. We've got our interview track here where we hear the woman talking. We've got our voiceover talent. Let's just maybe hear some of this. I'll put the mic down by the computer speaker.
We would make cream, butter, curds, and yogurt. We were even able to grow sorghum. That would give us a dry cereal that would last right through the dry season.
Well, those are the things that I wanted to share with you, the easy drag and drop method of editing videos in DaVinci Resolve. In our next lesson, we'll actually start assembling this video project, Better to Die Walking. And so if you haven't already done so, I invite you to subscribe to our channel so that YouTube will let you know. I guess you have to actually ring the bell, too, to have them let you know when we release that next lesson. And I'm going to put a couple of more links in the description below. I think we noticed today we ran into a situation where I used a keyboard shortcut that I had defined that wouldn't have been available to people just using the DaVinci keyboard shortcuts. So if you are finding that as I go along in these lessons that some of the keyboard shortcuts that I show you don't work, it might be a good idea to download Frank's keyboard shortcuts and install them on your DaVinci Resolve system. And in a previous lesson, we showed you how to do that. I'm also going to put a link to our series on quick tips for DaVinci Resolve, because there's a lot of things that I'm showing people there that are not necessarily being introduced in this series on how to edit. But there's some good tips there as well. But that's it for today, and so we'll say so long. See you next time here at Learning Media Skills. So long for now.